This is festivalPass Stories, a podcast series is told by the people who create and make festivals come to life. You will go behind the stage, kitchen, or studio door to hear the stories of passion and inspiration that started some of the world's most beloved festivals. Hear the startup stories and how an idea went from what if to what's next. All right, friends, this is festivalPass Stories, where we are, of course, presented by Dos Hombres, the artisanal mezcal meant to be shared, created by Aaron Paul and Brian Cranston. Have a drink with us at doshombres.com/delivery. And hey, ever want to have the opportunity to invest in a product that easily and early could be the next Airbnb? I say easily because entrepreneurs and celebrities with exits approaching $10 billion have already invested in festivalPass. Go to invest.festivalpass.com to learn more. And friends, my guest today, well, he hosts live events, a bit of a festival kitchen every day, so to speak. And you say that's impossible every day. But yes, he does it as a chef, entrepreneur, and leader of the three-ring circus known as his restaurants, V, Bistro Prime, and Gaijin. And in his spare time, he might be the world champion of canning. No, not firing people, canning vegetables and other incredible foods. Folks, he is also an author. Wow, I don't know where I find time for all that, but please say hello to Paul Virant. Paul, chef.
Hello.
How are you?
Good, very well. Happy New Year.
And
thanks for having me on.
Thank you. I say that to people in June. If I haven't seen them yet that year, I say Happy New Year. They're like, it's June. I'm like, but have we seen each other yet this year? No. So I think you can say it at any time, really.
I agree with you. I think it's a nice opportunity. It's a hospitable way to present to
sure.
somebody. So I'm with you.
Yeah.
At least for the whole month of January, I'm doing that.
Yeah. Why jump right into it when we can just okay. Hold on. Before we jump into it, let's start with hello. Let's start with Happy New Year. All right. Yeah. Paul, I think people are expecting to hear a French accent when they hear the culinary. Your escapades and your resume, and they hear that last name, Virant. And then this strong Midwestern accent pops out. So yes, friends, those restaurants I mentioned are in the greater Chicagoland area. But is there some French heritage in there in the name?
There is some French heritage. My heritage is, and I guess it goes in this order. It's French, Slovenian, German, and Irish.
All right. So the Irish, in Chicago, it would be more popular to do it the other way.
Right.
Irish, German, and then Slovenian and French. But
my hometown is St. Louis. So
okay.
I've been in Chicago since 96. But I'm a mutt like a lot of us are in this fine country, Pat.
So, unfortunately, your city, your home city, has had two professional football teams taken away from them. As now living in Chicago this long, in the Chicago area, have you adopted the Bears, or are you still loyal to, because you don't need to be. When people change football teams, I said that's crap. That's crap. You can't do that. But in your case, you had two teams leave you, so you get to pick any team you want. I say,
right. Yeah. So, was not a big football fan growing up, was more of a baseball fan.
Oh, it's a great city for baseball.
Right. Yeah. Second to the Yankees. Right. But for whatever reason, I don't feel like St. Louis was ever much of a football town. I mean, the old St. Louis Cardinals, I don't remember them getting the kind of support that they needed. And then they left. And then when the Rams came, it just seemed weird, right? Like they were in LA forever. So
right.
It was just strange, So, but I think they did win a Super Bowl, right?
They sure did. Yeah, with Kurt Warner. There you go. So
I was living in St. Louis, so I tend to, but I have, a couple of good buddies are Packers fans. So I kind of enjoy the kind of getting in between the rivalry of the Bears and the Packers,
Yeah, go for it. Get right in the middle there.
Big news, obviously, this week with the the cleaning house with the Bears, right?
Cleaning house of the Bears and my New York Football Giants. And I would agree with you that the Cardinals, baseball Cardinals, as we're talking about the football Giants, the baseball Cardinals, the Cardinals are second to the Yankees, but when you're in New York, we have to flip that around. I hope you understand. Which you were in New York for a while, and we'll come to that in a bit in your culinary adventure. So to start us on that culinary adventure, where and when was it when you first had that love for food that you were like, this is just something that you just, was it as a child? Did it come from the family?
It did, Pat. I mean, I think, I grew up in a family where, we didn't really talk much about religion and politics. Well, maybe we did talk about.
So you had a nice child, you had a friendly childhood.
But we didn't talk about maybe the typical sort of things that families chat about. We would talk about, what we were eating and what we were going to have at the next meal.
Yeah.
So food was like it was an essential part of our existence. It was, it's always been, most of the memories that I have are around food. Both of my grandmothers were great cooks, very, very different. The one on my dad's side, she definitely had kind of a little bit of a French thing going on. She would do sauces and that kind of stuff. And then on my mom's side, she was from a really small German town in Missouri called Freeburg. And she was, the farmer, the canner, right? Like she did, like where she lived, they like on July 4th, like the big thing was to harvest the cabbage, cut the cabbage, and make the sauerkraut. Like that was a big deal.
Yeah.
On the 4th,
Yeah, so German.
And then as you kind of move, as I got a little older and I was in high school, I mean, and I think you probably hear this from a lot of people in the restaurant industry, but I was kind of a knucklehead and I didn't really have a lot of direction on what exactly I was going to do with my life. And you know how it is. You're consistently asked that question. And I started working in restaurants. So the rest is kind of history. I mean, I got into it and then I enjoyed the culture. And, I mean, obviously restaurants have changed a lot, but, I enjoyed sort of the antics and the stories and the vibe of restaurants. So that's really how I got into it. And I worked in St. Louis. I started working in high school at a restaurant called Maison, and it was a French place that was out in the country, out in this town called St. Albans, which is now, it's obviously it's changed a lot and developed a lot. But Simone and Jobert Andujar, she was from Marseille, and he was Basque from overseas, and they had like they had a little French bistro for a long time in Clayton, and then they opened up this Malmaison, and it was it was one of those where they're good customers at and I think it was Le Bistro was the name of the place that they have it. I'm not.
Which I'll translate means the bistro, folks. For those who don't know French, that's what Le Bistro.
Nice job, Pat.
Well, I thought I'd help out the listeners.
But they, one of those deals where they, clearly had some, good customers, loyal customers that had the financial capability of backing something huge, right? So Malmaison, they bought this pretty good sized property that had, it was an old inn. It was called, I think at one point it was called the Old Barn Inn, and they converted this to the restaurant. But there was an old, like an old, I mean, it was kind of a homestead. They had a, like an old cellar on the property. I mean, Simone would do these beautiful gardens, but so this was a really sort of eye-opening experience to me to, I would say, European-based, food and culture.
Yeah.
Where they really embraced the season. It was all about the ingredients, all that kind of stuff. So it was a great experience. But a lot of stories from that restaurant, because their son actually ran the kitchen. So Simone was the head chef, and Jobert ran the front. But like Jobert, as an example, like he had one glass eye, and like his son.
I didn't mean to laugh. I'm sorry. It's just it sounds the legend of Gilbert.
It's not nice, but his son was constantly talking about how he was gonna, and he was referred to as the boss. He's like, I'm gonna punch boss in his good eye. It was a constant, But anyway, that's where it all started. And there was one of the captains, this guy Tony, who told me about the Culinary Institute of America in New York.
Yeah.
So that was back with when it was not as easy to get the kind of information that you can now, right? You had to search for it. So,
just open up a page and Google any thought you have in your head, and you're going to get all the information there.
Right.
So you mentioned that. Yeah. So you cut your teeth there at this French restaurant out in the small town in St. Albans, and you then go to undergrad and you get a degree in nutrition. Then you take that next step and you go to the Culinary Institute of America. Now, as I mentioned in our pre-show, folks, you missed the pre-show. It was quite a party. But I went to Marist, so we are Hudson Valley brothers, man. I'm telling you.
Yeah.
This is true.
Part of the country, right?
Beautiful part of the country. I remember we went to I guess it's one of the robber barons. I guess it was Carnegie. The Carnegie estate up. I think it was the Carnegie estate up there. And we're looking out the back window, and we go out to the porch and talk about these crazy parties where they bob for apples that had jewels in them and stuff like that they give away as prizes to their guests. And I looked across the Hudson. I was like, it's amazing that nothing has been developed on that other side. And the tour guide says, yeah, it's because they own all of that land and they never wanted it developed because they thought it would ruin their view. That's how crazy wealthy that they were, and those families still are.
Interesting.
Was it Vanderbilt? It was Vanderbilt.
Oh, yeah.
My fault, right?
Vanderbilt.
It was not Carnegie. The Vanderbilt mansion.
It was right in Hyde Park.
Yeah, right in Hyde Park. But you got the degree. Your undergrad degree was in nutrition. That must have been a huge leg up for you when you got to the culinary, because as you said, there were probably some knuckleheads there who just simply did not have that training that you did.
Yeah, it was all different. It was mostly, and I think it still dominates with males in culinary schools. I think it's changed a lot, but like when I was there, it was mostly males. But you had kids that were just right out of high school. The Culinary Institute now offers, you can get a bachelor's, but at that point it wasn't. It was either an associate's in either culinary or pastry arts. So, and then you had professionals that were getting out of whatever they were doing. You had lawyers that were, I want to cook. I want to have, So I was kind of in the probably in the middle sort of age group, and I would say even more so. Clearly having a bachelor's was a step up, but the other thing too was I had experience working in restaurants.
Yeah.
So
and fine dining restaurants.
Yeah. So I knew about things. So it was we could hit the ground running. And one of my good buddies, Israel, who is now a chef, he's got restaurants in Copenhagen, in Denmark.
Ooh,
and
nice.
He was one of my, he came from Gainesville, but same thing. Like I worked for French chefs back in the St. Louis area. He worked at a pretty high-end country club in Gainesville for a German chef. So we could really relate, like, oh yeah, like he would tell, just hilarious stories about his experience, and I could as well. But that was, we had a leg up. So it was great. It was a great, it was I mean, I ended up, because I mean, as you know from spending some time up there, but I mean, the Hudson Valley is like it's an agricultural haven. I mean, there's incredible wineries and orchards and farms, and it's even more so now. I mean, that's when one of the first artisanal farmstead goat cheese operations, which was Coach Farms, which was in Pine Plains, New York. So this is all a little north of there. But that's when all that, that's when that started. And like I worked at
farm to table, right? Like kind of
So
starting
all of this influence ends up sort of circling back around years down the road when I opened up my own restaurant. But yeah, I mean, exposure to local farms, and I worked at a winery, Cascade Mountain Winery in Armenia, New York. So that was sort of due east from where we were in Hyde Park. But we were getting stuff right down the road from different farms, and another that was funny because the chef there, this guy Rich, was from New Jersey. He was from Trenton.
When you go by there, when you're driving, you're on the train to Philadelphia. It's there's these lights on the bridge that say, "What Trenton makes, the world takes," including your friend, the chef.
Yeah, that's funny. Anyway, Rich was, prior to becoming a chef, he was a hitman in Jersey. So it's like
that's the resume. That was
my boss.
That is the New Jersey resume. Yeah, I grew up in New Jersey, so yeah, that same thing.
What did you do before cooking? Anyway, so
hitman. Then I got into the restaurant game. What's your story? That's why I haven't got a date on Match.com in a while. I think is I probably revealed too much. But look, he can be a reformed hit person.
Yeah. No, he was really into, which was great. He was really into the local farmers and producers. Trout from down the road, from the Catskills, and
cool. I think when they heard what he did previously, he probably got the very best of everything delivered whenever he wanted. They're like, here you go.
He made sure that happened, right?
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And there's so much up in that. There's so much up in that area, and I haven't been in a while, and shame on me, because even my school has doubled in size, and they took over the other side of the highway and built a bridge, a walking bridge underneath the highway, so they connected two campuses, and and the Culinary Institute has jumped by leaps and bounds as well. Just in the growth, as you said, it was a place to get an associate's, and then now you can get an undergrad degree there as well.
Yeah, so they expanded out to California after I graduated. Right? They have a campus in Napa Valley.
Yeah. It's incredible. It's incredible what that brand stands for, what it always stood for, but now what it stands for on a completely different level. So you finish up at the culinary at CIA, as the cool kids on the street call it, and you say, "This is what I'm doing for a living," and you take your talents like LeBron James, but you took your talents to New York City. And you start to work at fine dining, I believe, Michelin star restaurant March, under Chef Wayne Nish and Hillary Gregg. And, I actually lived about 3 doors down from March for a decade. So it seems like you're following me from Hyde Park to some place. Kind of. I'm glad that we're doing this via Zoom, because I'm feeling a stalker vibe.
I did work for some C grade, maybe even D grade catering operations in Jersey when I was in school, because you constantly, like at the CIA, I mean, if you wanted to work on the weekends, there was plenty of stuff to do,
Sure.
But it might be like you got to drive down to Jersey and work for whomever. But I mean, I worked for some real interesting operations, that were. But anyway, so yeah, because that was where you were from, so maybe I was following you. That's the point.
Yeah. So you're in Jersey as well, yeah. So okay, I'm just glad the man wasn't following me.
but going to New York and having, at least in my mind, having some experience, working before school, I worked during the school. I felt like I had at least begun my career as a professional in the culinary arts. It was a really humbling experience to go, and like when I was in school, my friends and I would, we'd take the train into the city. I mean, it was easy, and we would do, we would do a stage, right? A stage is you go visit. I mean, you go spend a day in a kitchen, and and you work for free, but it's an opportunity that maybe you're applying for a job, maybe you just want to learn something, whatever. But you're doing a stage, so we would do that a lot. And then obviously, as we were getting closer to graduate, then it was more important to do that because you're looking for jobs. But like I interviewed, so I applied for a lot of different restaurants. And this is again back when you're putting together your resume, you're going to the restaurant, knocking on the door. Hey, can I meet the chef, or who can I talk to? And then most of the time it was like, you didn't have that opportunity to meet anybody. You just left your resume, and then calling the restaurant multiple days afterward to try to get the chef on the phone or somebody on the phone that you could talk to. But I worked a lot of, Park Avenue Cafe, Gotham Bar and Grill,
love Gotham.
Just Le Bernardin. I mean, and this is like mid '90s, so there was really kind of a restaurant explosion, I think, happening in New York, and which was exciting because a lot of the explosion was led by American chefs, right?
Yeah, Bobby Flay.
Bobby Flay was super young when he opened Mesa Grill and all that kind of stuff. But I did a stage at Lutece, and Andre Sotomayor was still, the chef owner, but he had his chef, the chef that was running the kitchen was this German guy, Eberhard Mueller.
Yeah.
And
it doesn't get much more German than that name.
Yeah. And I interviewed with this guy, like I did a stage, and then, you do a stage, and at some point, you may get an opportunity maybe towards the end of service where the chef might sit down with you for a little bit and have a quick chat with you. And I had that opportunity, and he's like, we're only looking for, well, he started the conversation while he was looking at my resume, and he was basically like, you haven't even like, you need to think that, or you need to understand that your career just started now. Like, I don't know what I see what you've done before. You're from, and I'm sure he botched, Missouri or St. Louis, wherever I was from. I went to college in West Virginia. I mean, he was kind of like you haven't done, he was basically like, you haven't done anything, and now you're in New York City, and now you're finally starting to work and develop yourself as a cook. And the only opportunity that they had for me was in pastry, so I wasn't interested in that. Right. But there was no way I was working for that guy. And maybe I would have if there was a different opportunity, because Lutece was, it was an iconic restaurant.
Oh yeah,
been there since. I think they opened. I feel like they opened. It was either the late '60s or the late '50s when they opened. But when I accepted a job in March, I was a Midwestern guy, polite, respectful. So I would call the other restaurants.
Perfect for New York. Perfect for New York in the '90s.
To call them and be like, hey, just want to let you know I took this other job. Just trying to be, I don't want to burn any bridges. And I forget what he said to me, but it was not, it was not nice. I did get him on the phone. He was like, are you kidding me? Like, you're calling me and telling me this? It's like, something like, I don't give a shit, like whatever. And then hung up. That was
and just another reason why you knew that in your gut, this was not the place to work.
Yeah. He actually, I'd have to look on the internet, but I think there was there may have been some drama in his career with not with just the way he treated staff. Like I think there may have been an article at some point in the New York Times, because he ended up running after Andre Solmer left. He ended up running the restaurant there at Lutece, and anyway, but happens to the best of us.
That stuff catches up with you. That you just can't. I think workers in general, people are like, oh, it's the young kids and they're spoiled and they can't take it. It's like, no, people were just sick of getting treated like crap, and enough people finally spoke up. There's also things about young people we can say as well as older people now. But anyway, the point is that, it's like someone was like, I'm not working like this anymore. I'm not working for, I have a choice, man. I can work for somebody else. You can't blackball me. Right. What happened? But I had like experience.
Yeah. But I had like one of my other stages was at Charlie Palmer's restaurant, Oriole.
Yeah.
And which was a great restaurant. And one of the line cooks, she was a badass, and I was super intimidated by her, and she just was, and a lot of these stages were, it wasn't, some of them were, like when I did the stage at Boulay, I remember spending a good chunk of the afternoon cleaning skate, like whole skate, and cutting out my hands, because they have, on the top of a stingray, they have those, kind of not, like a sharp sort of,
their skin. It's just, it's like a defense mechanism.
It was just kind of a miserable stage. You spent like hours in the prep kitchen, which was in the basement. You weren't seeing anything, but then other stages were like, okay, you're going to work saute, so then you were on the line with them, and then that wasn't easy either, so it was tough.
But March was an incredible experience. You're there for about 2 years, right? In the kitchen there? Yeah. And you watched that restaurant grow, and what a clientele that they had there. A lot of regulars. There was, I think when I first moved into the neighborhood, it was a dream. I'd be like, oh, one day I'm going to eat at that place. Because it was not cheap. And I remember having like a pretty good week at work, and then going in there and just sitting at the bar, having a glass of wine, having something to eat, and just really treating myself. And it was, what a place to live. I lived in this pre-war walk-up apartment that hadn't been updated in 60 years. But when I say pre-war, I'm not even sure which war it was. Could have been the War of 1812. I don't know. But it was, it was old place, but it was a great place. And then you walk down the street, and 58th Street had that classic park at the end of the street on the East River. Woody Allen, the cover of Manhattan was two people sitting on a bench in that park overlooking the river. Ed Burns did a movie there. And it was just, and there was just that small street, Riverview Terrace there that people were like, we wouldn't even know there was another street there, but it was so private. And like, I felt like I lived like 3 addresses and 23 tax brackets away from my neighbors. It was like, it was just, Sutton Place was an incredible place to be. But you go from Sutton Place, right? And you go from there, and you and I are talking about one of our favorite things about Sutton Place was the slice of pizza on First Avenue.
Yeah.
The ultimate pizza.
Yeah. So I obviously worked there, and but couldn't afford to live there. I lived in Jersey City, so I did the commute.
That's a commute.
Yeah, I would commute. Take the PATH train over to the Twin, through the Twin Towers, and jump on the E train, and the E train would take me over to like Lexington and 53rd, and then I would walk to March. So but yes, there was a little pizza joint right there that I would stop often, and grab a slice or two before I went into work,
Yeah, she's chef de cuisine at a Michelin star restaurant. If you're wondering where they eat before work, is that they go to the slice joint on the corner.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned, and actually, it's unfortunate. You mentioned the Michelin guide, but at that point, which is kind of crazy, the Michelin Guide was not in the United States. So I forget when that. I think the Michelin Guide came out in 2009 in Chicago. I think maybe it was a year before or after, like either 07 or 08 when it started in New York. So March never had the opportunity to gain that international recognition of having a star. Or even
there aren't many. I think there's something. It's in like the double digits, the amount of 2 Michelin. If you have 2 stars, there's very few of those, and then finding a 3-star Michelin restaurant is, as your Irish background would say, trying to find hen's teeth. Right? It's about that rare. But I mean, there are a few just a few in New York. I believe Chicago has 1 or 2, but that's a nice thing to park for a second there, because we're going to get back to the Michelin star in a moment, folks. But of course, you go from New York to Chicago, and then you work at the legendary Charlie Trotters, one of the most famous restaurants in the country. That had to be a dream. A kid from the Midwest, going back to the Midwest with all this great training at a fine dining establishment in New York, and now you're going to work at the Charlie Trotters.
It was a challenge getting the job, but once I secured the job, I couldn't have been more excited about moving up to Chicago, which is a great city, but also, like you said, working for, probably, I would agree with you. I think Charlie Trotters in its prime was maybe the most well-known or the most famous of any restaurant in the country.
Yeah.
I think it, I think of the other great restaurants at the time, like Danielle and Boulay and Jean George. But those all opened later than Trotters.
Sure.
Trotters opened in 86 or 87. But yeah, it was a great, and I was hired. It was the process to get the job was very challenging, right? You had to, again, trying to get the resume in front of somebody. And at the time, after I left the East Coast and moved to St. Louis, I moved back home for a couple of months, and that was sort of my home base. And that's where I kind of navigated the process of getting the job with Charlie. So you're calling, you're sending you mail up your resume, and then he's like, okay, come in for a stage, and then you got to fly up for a stage.
Wow.
And I had a great stage, and I think it went well, and all that, this and that. And I'm trying to remember how. Oh yeah, and then I go back to St. Louis after the stage, and I think after my stage, I don't think I had a chance to talk to Charlie or his chef at that point in time. So back home again, and you're trying to get in touch with somebody, like, hey, what's the deal? Is there an opportunity for me? That kind of thing. And then they're like, okay, we want you to come up and do a tasting for the chef. And I'm like, all right. So then you're flying back up, which was easy. That was when airfare was cheap. So
yeah,
it was an easy
People's
flight.
Express from St. Louis to Chicago.
Yeah. Everything from security, all that stuff was easy, right? So, so then I did there was and it was during service, but it was like a blind tasting where
wow,
they put together like a bunch of proteins. It was like whole squab, a saddle of venison, a blue nose snapper, some whole fish. I think it was, there may have been some soft shell crabs or something, but just, a sheet pan full of stuff. And it wasn't like, and it was like, you're going to do a tasting. You're going to do 4 courses for 4 people. You got 2 hours to do it. You can use anything else in the kitchen. Have at it, right?
It sounds like the original, like food reality competition.
Like Chopped or whatever, one of those shows.
They got this from this idea. They're like, wait a minute.
Yeah. But it was, I mean, it was difficult on a lot of levels, but one was because, you know, in 96, Charlie Trotters was booked every night, you know, whether they were closed on Sundays and Mondays, but, you know, so on a Tuesday night, they're doing, you know, they're maxed out I mean, they were booked. I mean, people were coming from all over the world to come eat at that restaurant. So the cooks, and, you know, it's an unfamiliar kitchen, and the cooks, I mean, nobody's helping you. Like, oh yeah, here, this is where, you know, what are you looking for? You know, you need fresh basil. Yeah, it's over here. You know? So you got to just figure it out and get in there and look for pans and all that stuff. But it obviously went really well. But, you know, my mistake. So I did the tasting. I felt really good about it. You know, and you didn't. You know, you plated the dishes, and then they brought it to the chef and whoever else. I think it was like the GM and the sommelier at that point. I think Joe Spellman, who's a master som, I think he was there. So that's the tasting panel that you're dealing with. Yeah. But so you don't get any feedback, and Guillermo, who was his head chef, you know, when it was all done, he was like, all right, you know, you're done, whatever. He's like, you know, Charlie can't have a conversation with you now. You know, if you want to stick around and help during service, you know, maybe, you know, do a stage for the rest of the shift, right? And I was so amped up that it was done, and I felt good about it. Like, the last thing I want to do was hang out there. Like, I wanted to get out of there.
You're like, get me to the pub. I need a shot.
Exactly. And I had some friends in town. So, and I think I had even said to some friends, like, hey, you know, like, I should be, you know, it should be a, you know, afternoon deal that you know, we can hook up. So, but Pat, that was a big mistake. So I left, and then same thing back in St. Louis. No word, no nothing. Tried to call them a couple of times, you know, try to call, like, nothing. Couldn't get in touch with them. Finally, I mean, it had to have been at least a week. Maybe it wasn't a week, but it was a while, where I got him on the phone. I got Charlie on the phone again, and he was like, I'd like you to come up for an interview, you know? And I'm like, Jesus, you know, like, now I got to come back.
What a process.
Yeah.
What a process.
So I came back up there, and I said, and I met him. I came in, you know, and I went in and met him, and he was like, first thing he said, he didn't say like, hey, did a nice job of tasting, anything. He was like, I don't even think he said hello. He was just like, I was so disappointed that you left after your tasting. Like, that's what he said.
Not mad, disappointed. We all know that's what.
I'm sitting there I was speechless. I didn't know what to say. You know, I was like, you know, anyway, but I ended up getting the job. But it was, you know, it was a great experience. It was a difficult experience, and I didn't, you know, I say I was there for a growing season. You know, I started in May, and by September I was gone. And Guillermo, the chef, and it may have just been just that whole how I got the job, and, you know, I don't know, but it was tough, and
and a tough place to work once you finally go through the gauntlet of interviews and everything.
Yeah, I was hired as the tournant, which is the position that sort of covers other stations. But we had at that point, Trotters had a regular tasting menu and a vegetarian menu. His vegetarian book had come out, or his vegetable book had come out when I was working there. And they had stages all the time. You know, they had people from all over the world that would come stage, Japanese guys, I mean, all over. And then they had a lot of interns, you know, like culinary school interns that were there. and they were always the ones that were doing the amuse. And the amuse was, it was, so you do, so you needed a muse for the vegetarian menu and the regular menu, and then every customer got a selection of canapes, right? So when you sat down and you started your meal, I think you got the canapes maybe first, or you're kind of nibbling on that, maybe have a cocktail, whatever. Amuse comes, and then the menu goes. But it was just, if you're doing 120 covers, so you're prepping the amuse, which was, anything that we did in that restaurant was intricate and complicated, right?
Right.
From the prep to the plating. He was meticulous about, like if your fingerprint, maybe you had got some olive oil on your finger and then you touched the rim of the plate. He would push that back in the past. That was an unacceptable plate, instead of maybe just wiping it and moving on, maybe everything else looked good. So it was a challenge, and then you had, between 4 and 5 canapes for each customer.
Wow.
So you're looking at like 500. So every day. And it was, so I was often put with that team, and it was every day was a shit show. Like we were always pushing to get ready. Like we would do things like deviled quail eggs, which would be, half of a quail egg would be a little canape. So there's, so you gotta, that's 60 quail eggs that you gotta cook, peel, cut, take the filling out, make the filling, pipe it back in there, and then there was probably some kind of a garnish, chervil leaf that you had to pick, So it just, but there was never, there was never any like support, So
right.
So I had
work. It was not only trial by fire, which quite literally to get the job, but then when you do have the job, it's just every day. It's like the hardest kitchen to work in. How is that sustainable?
Yeah, and Guillermo, the chef, and the sous chef, this guy Michael, who was actually, he was younger than me by a couple years, but he was a punk, and they they were not supportive. So I would say, hey, listen, this is ridiculous. We'll get this done, but I need to be able to come in a little earlier, right? Because the rule at that point when I was working there, and I feel like it was 2:00, may have been 1:00, but there was a hard in time for the cooks.
Yeah.
Like let's say it was 1:00. I think it was 2, but let's say it was 1:00, but nobody could come into the kitchen until 1:00. And their philosophy was that if you came in a little earlier, you dick around and you wouldn't do, you wouldn't hustle, right? You wouldn't work hard. They didn't have, during the daytime, they never had a dishwasher. So cooks every half an hour, whatever it was, took turns over in the pot sink washing dishes. It was like they made it a lot harder than it needed to be. So I convinced Guillermo that let me come in earlier, and then I'll get this done. I'll make sure that my amuse bouche canapé team was on point. And he's like, okay, that's fine. And so I did that. And then what do? They piled work. They piled extra projects on me. I came in at 10:00.
Yeah.
Piled extra work on me. So come 5:00, we were in the same boat, and like our team wasn't ready. And, I had people in the back that were like prepping, the deviled eggs, it was just crazy. So,
Jeez.
yeah. So at some point I got fed up with it, and I was like, I'm out. I'm not doing this.
Yeah. And, good for you. And you went to some, other fine restaurants, Ambria, Everest, and Blackbird. And at what point, when you got out of that Trotters experience, and now you're finding your groove, what point in that career did you say it is time for me to start my own place? Was it did somebody say I want to talk to the chef and invest, or how did it happen? It's a big
Yeah,
leap.
I think the dream for me was always to have my own restaurant. I mean,
Okay.
I definitely, and I think, obviously I'm fortunate to have had the opportunity. And I think that's a dream for a lot of creative people to be able to create and do what they want to do. Right. Like if you're working for somebody else, I mean, I see it with, and I've always tried to encourage that development within cooks that I believe have the potential. It's like,
Yeah.
how do you encourage them? You want to, but so I always want to have my own place. And I had, I think a lot of it, I think what sealed the deal for me, I mean, I guess it was even probably prior to Blackbird, but, working with Paul Kahn at Blackbird, that was the first, well, other than Wayne Nish, that was the first, well, and the guy from the winery in New York, but he was an American chef that was not too much older than I was, so I could kind of relate to him. I felt like I was working with him, not as much for him. And I had already been sort of tinkering the idea. My wife and I at the time had just had our first son, and we were living in the Ukrainian village in the Chicago, and we were looking at. I mean, we started looking at spaces over on Division between, let's say Ashland and Western. Like we were like, let's do it. Like get a little small restaurant, and then we ended up moving out to the suburbs. But it was common. Like I was tired of working for other people. And I wanted to have my own gig, So that.
Yeah, that's incredible. And you're like, this is always the dream. And you head to the suburbs, you open V, which according to Hinsdale resident Paul Drum, he's also known as the Oracle of Hinsdale, if you didn't know that.
I didn't know that.
Definitely your most demanding customer. If there's somebody who sent his food back 6 or 7 times, it was this guy. Like, who is this guy?
I'm looking him up after this.
Yeah. But he said, and this is, you're maybe almost like a Yelp review, but he said this was the first city quality restaurant. He works in Chicago every day, and is always entertaining his clients and so on, or they're entertaining him. And so he's always out dining, always. And he said this was the first city quality restaurant that happened in the Hinsdale area. And I mean, you started a trend because it really took off from there. But why did you leave? You look at
the city.
It's in the heart of the loop, and then you leave the city and take this chance at fine dining. What was it? Was it a financial thing, or you're like, why don't we've got this young child, and let's maybe a better quality of life, and hey, no one's doing what we're doing here, so let's make something new happen. See how that goes.
Yeah, it was a combination of all that stuff. I mean, my wife is a doctor, so we moved to Hinsdale for her job. She was working in Downers Grove, so she was definitely keeping our financial our financial well-being in a good place over the years. So I owe a lot to her. But anyway, so we moved out.
Shout out, wife.
Yeah, we moved out to Hinsdale for her. And it was exactly that. It was like, we kind of, Hinsdale's got great schools. We were starting a family, so there was that. Easier commute. Hinsdale, Western Springs, it's one town away. It's across county line. Like that's it. And the other big thing was that Hinsdale had already passed the new ordinance to have a liquor license. They didn't for a long time. They were a dry town. Like a lot of Chicago towns, like Oak Park, Evanston, Western Springs was a dry town. They had just passed the ordinance, but the only liquor license was I forget it's a Mariano's now, but Dominic's over there, which that was it. So they had a grocery store that you could get liquor and booze, but there was no restaurants. And they had done a survey in Western Springs about what the residents wanted. And they're like, we want a restaurant. We want to, we want to have with a nice bar. Right. And we just, we were, you're not, it is people have, that's been the question, right? Like we're not from the area. So how did we sort of integrate ourselves into the community? I mean, we met a few people, you made some connections, we met, and this individual who was on the Western Springs Business Association, and they were really pushing for a restaurant, and they loved the idea of this city restaurant in Western Springs. So that was the genesis of that. And I was really fortunate. I need to give another shout out to my wife's dad, my father-in-law. My in-laws were living in Kansas City, and they moved from Kansas City to help us with our kids.
Wow.
And his name is Al, and Al was, he was instrumental in helping put together the business plan, help raise the capital, and all that kind of stuff. All those things. He was in banking and insurance his whole career, so it was huge. And he, I think at the end of the day, like obviously he loves my kids, but like, he didn't want to be.
You love the opportunity too.
He had it was like, what do you want to do? You want to change diapers and help watch your grandkids, or do you want to work in a restaurant, and have some red wine and schmooze guests, So
he saw multiple opportunities.
That's how it all went down.
It takes a village to raise a kid. It takes a village to raise a restaurant.
Yeah. And he's still around, and he still is one who I consult with all the time about stuff. I mean, and not to fast forward, but now, like he's not as involved in the day-to-day operations. And I got to tell you, like that, when he started to kind of, shift from doing that, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, man, it was tough. It was difficult. It's still, like I feel like I'm still crawling out of that. Like he let me just be a chef, and he
handled the business. He handled front of the house,
right? And I'm still trying to figure out all the other stuff, right? Being a restaurateur, anyway. But yeah, so that's how we did it. That's the story of V.
And where did the name come from? What does the name V come from?
Well, it's French for life, and the idea was that for me, I mean, food defines culture, and culture defines life, and I mean they're all sort of intertwined. I mean, food is life, and so we wanted to create a space that was it was an opportunity for people to celebrate and really enjoy food with their friends and family, and enjoy life. Like, so that's where it came from.
Vive la vie.
We didn't, it's not a French restaurant. I mean, people have often thought that it was, but there's no question that over the years, there's definitely been a Western European influence, French, Italian, Spanish. I mean, these are, you look back at the restaurants and the chefs that I work for, that's the kind of influence that you see on the menu.
Yeah. And that's why I was asking about the names. I was like, the name is obviously sounding and looking French, but it's the cuisine is not.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's, the contemporary American term for restaurants in the United States. I mean, it's, I don't know. It's used a lot. I don't know how else to kind of describe, how the dynamic of restaurants in the United States that have so many different influences, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're in Paris and somebody's opening up an American restaurant or a burger restaurant, like it does seem to be American, right? But if you're a young chef and you're sort of creating your own style, your own, unless you're saying, hey, I'm doing an Italian restaurant or whatever it is, it's a composition of a lot of different cultures, a lot of different influences. And then it's also sort of regional because we're in the upper Midwest. So you have the Great Lakes and that kind of thing, and Michigan, and great fruit and stuff from there and all that kind of stuff. So
and then so the father-in-law is helping you out in front of the house.
Yep.
He's running the business. You're able to just concentrate on the culinary, on the cuisine. And then in 2011, you get the call. We're bringing it all back full circle here. And you get the call that your restaurant V has been awarded a Michelin star. So bravo to that. But what was that like? I mean, they do call you, right?
Yeah, we got the call.
You literally got the call. Like, you're in the draft room, and the Dallas Cowboys are on the phone, and they want you to be their quarterback.
Right.
I don't know why I just said the Cowboys. I hate the Cowboys. But, I mean, right? It's like, that's an iconic position. And what an iconic thing to have a Michelin star on your restaurant. Not Charlie, not Trotters, not March, your place, your brand.
Yeah, it was definitely a career highlight. There's no question. I mean, getting that call was, I mean, the Michelin guide was sort of the unreachable, unattainable. I mean, for many years, just because it didn't exist outside of Europe. So there's that. But whatever, we knew it was coming, right? We knew it was coming to the United States. So then it was, it was huge, But I will say,
how do you get them in there? Do they find you? How do they? I
don't know. I don't know, but I remember when the guide was coming out, and I think of myself as pretty humble, but I remember feeling pretty confident that we were going to get 1 star.
Yeah,
that's how I felt about what we were doing. I'm like,
humble confidence.
And I knew, you knew your competition, which for the most part was all in the city. What were they doing? What are other restaurants? I mean, we were, I think we were one of the better restaurants in the Chicagoland area. So I was confident that we'd get one. So,
and do you think it helped that you were sort of this, oasis in the suburbs for people, where it was so unique that, as you said, the only competition was miles away in the city. So they weren't walking around Hinsdale and in those neighborhoods and finding anything like yours. Yours was, as Paul said himself to this Paul, that Paul Drum to you says that it really set a trend.
Yeah. I mean, I think, I don't know how. I mean, maybe it was just, it might have been the amount of restaurants that they were looking at, right? So, they have a handful of different inspectors, right, that sort of work for them, or I think it's probably a volunteer thing, I would imagine. And they, and that's how they do it. Yeah, I mean, we had gotten, the other thing too is we had gotten some other great accolades. I mean, I had gotten Food and Wine Best New Chef in 2007 and Chicago Magazine. I mean, so there have been some other things. I'm sure they're looking at that stuff, right? They're like, oh, we got to go check this place out, right?
Yeah, so, and following the Michelin star, you also were a finalist for James Beard Award as well, which would be right on par with that star, if not higher.
Right. Yeah, it was great. It's
as
funny.
A chef, I was going to say, as a chef, is one more important than the other, James Beard or Michelin, or is it like you'll take both? But if you had to choose one,
I'll take either one. I mean, it's interesting, because and you probably know that. Well, maybe you don't know this, but I mean, the crazy thing was, as confident as I was, and we got the Michelin star, and that, what, I think you're right. I think it was in 2011 when the guide came out. I said 2009 first, but I think it was 11, because 2011 was when I opened Perennial Virant in the Hotel Lincoln with the Boca Group. So that was when I partnered with the Boca Group. That was the first time that I'd opened up a second restaurant with those guys. So there was a lot of stuff going on. And then I did get a nomination for a Beard Award or whatever. So everything was great. in 2012, the Michelin Guide came back out, and we didn't get a star. And we've never, like, V has never gotten a star since then. And the interesting thing is, and it came out a few years ago, finally, that they just, and they never said this, but they were not looking at suburban restaurants anymore. They stopped looking at suburban restaurants.
Look at
But,
that.
Pat, you want to talk about a career low point would be that next year. I mean, all these great things happening, there hadn't been anything that had really changed. I mean, what have we done? I mean, we weren't any different. I was shocked and devastated the very next year when the guide came out, but there was no explanation. There was no so then you're just like, what the F, right? So
right. And that's news, right? That's it's not news that you got the star anymore. It's now news that you didn't keep the star with no explanation.
Well, there was an article because there was a handful of like Courtrights. I mean, there was a handful of like sort of higher end places in the suburbs that had a Michelin star, and then they all got dropped the next year.
Look at that.
I know. Anyway, but in life you gotta move on. But that was a tough blow. That was a kidney shot by Tyson.
Yeah, and you didn't want one of those in the late '80s, early '90s. But you did pick yourself back up, even with bad news, because in 2012, now you've got the accoutrement. Now the three French words I know there, but you have all the accoutrement that comes with the Michelin star now. You had the action figure, of course, the lunchbox and the backpack. I'm kidding, but you did put a book together. You put a cookbook together.
Right.
The Preservation Kitchen, let me make sure I get this correct, the craft of making and cooking with pickles and preserves, the agrédu. Did I say that right?
There you go.
Yeah. Now 4 French terms. Yes.
Yeah, no, we were, the train kept moving. The train kept moving. We had been, because, that cookbook was a couple year project. So my co-author, Kate, we started working on that probably in 2010. And she's done a handful of other great books, but so there was that going. I had Perennial in the Hotel Lincoln, which was totally different because it was in a hotel. We had a rooftop bar. We opened a coffee shop, Elaine's. Jay Parker, which was, John Parker was the guy he was the bodyguard that supposedly was keeping his eyes on Abraham Lincoln when he was shot. He had, the story was that he went outside for a nip, and that's when Lincoln got shot. So that's what that
worst bodyguard ever.
Yeah, worst bodyguard ever.
He did not get a Michelin star for bodyguarding that next year. No.
But
he got there before.
It was exciting. It was exciting times to get involved with different food service concepts, concepts like coffee shop. I think Elaine's still uses some of the recipes and stuff that we started down there. The Jay Parker was super exciting. That was I feel like the Jay Parker was the beginning of kind of like across the country where it just, building owners and developers, they would make sure that they would have a rooftop opportunity for restaurants. Now, look at all the rooftops that there are. Right. That was crazy. It was exciting. So there was a lot of exciting things, and the book was very exciting. It really it's solidified, on pages what V was all about at the core, which was, super seasonal cooking, buying from a lot of local farmers and producers. And we're in the upper Midwest. Seasons are a little shorter. How do we preserve things? And then how do we incorporate that stuff in our dishes? We were doing, pickled fennel, beurre blancs, and different things that I'd like to think that, other, I was one of the only chefs, or maybe one of the few chefs in the country, or even in the world, that was, incorporating this stuff into the food.
Yeah, cooking with pickles does not sound like a very appetizing thing, but you're talking about pickling and all of this. Did you get that love from when you were younger, from the German side of your family, the pickling and the canning? Did that all come from your mom's side of the family?
Well, it did.
You mentioned it earlier, so and I called you the world champion of canning. So this was something.
I would say, how about this? I was exposed to that then, and even helped with some of that stuff, but I don't remember totally digging it at that point. I mean, when you're younger, you're like, "This is a pain in the ass. I got to help with, I got to shuck all this corn or whatever it is." So, interestingly enough, I think the style of cooking, like so, incorporating pickles and jams and agri-doux and fermented things, all that stuff really came from my time living in NYC and working at March, because to kind of circle back to that, I mean, this is, I was from the Midwest, kind of grew up out in the country, went to college in West Virginia, Hudson Valley, culinary school, then went to New York. So really was finally living in a big city and was exposed to a lot of ethnic foods, a lot of foods that I had never had before in my life, all the different, Asian foods. And the one thing that I loved about all those foods was they always have like relishes and fermented things and chili paste and pickles and stuff that balance out the richness of the food. If you go get Korean barbecue, there's all this cool pickles and things,
Yeah.
So I love that, and I liked how that balanced the food. So that was definitely, I mean, living in a big city and working with, Wayne Nish, which is kind of interesting. He, his mother was Japanese and his father was from Malta in the Mediterranean. So you want to talk about a different background, but there was a lot of Japanese influence on that menu. We use a lot of soy sauce. We use a lot. And it's so funny now looking back on all that stuff, because now I have a Japanese restaurant.
I was going to say not only influenced Wayne, it influenced you as well, because you opened the first of its kind in Chicago.
Yeah, the first okonomiyaki restaurant.
Okonomiyaki.
Yeah, okonomiyaki. But that's I got to give my wife credit. I got to give her all the credit for that, because real quick. I mean, she's a doctor, but she studied Japanese in college at Duke, and she lived near Osaka for a semester in college and fell in love with okonomiyaki. So
real underachiever, this wife of yours.
Right. When we first started dating, when I was working at Trotters, was when we were when that whole thing kicked off. She's trying to impress me about her knowledge about something that I might not know anything about, which was true, okonomiyaki. She's like, "You ever had okonomiyaki?" I'm like, I don't know.
I've had omakase.
yeah, right. I don't know what that is, but
those extra syllables are throwing me off.
Yeah, so that influence, the gaijin is all her. It's all her. I mean, I've been messing with that for years, and my kids have grown up eating it. And traveling over there sealed the deal, right? Going over to Japan and really trying it finally, making it for years, and then trying it there. You're like, why isn't there okonomiyaki in the United States? Why can't you find this? It's massive in Japan. You're looking at 25,000 plus okonomiyaki shops across that country. Yeah. And it's not even that big. Like, it's not like if you're in Hong Kong, it's not like you can get okonomiyaki in Hong Kong, but it's not big outside of Japan. It's just crazy. Yeah. You don't see it like some of the other Japanese things, like ramen or sushi.
Sure. Yeah, when that's fun and people love the ramen and stuff. But you open up this new concept and you name it gaijin, which I believe means. I've gone from French now to Japanese means outsider. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
You're
looking for me to expand on that, I think, Pat.
Yes, a bit more.
Do I look Japanese? Do I look Japanese to you? Do I look Japanese?
You do not.
I'm a gaijin. No, my partner Lance is Jamaican. He's black, and I'm a white guy, and we're trying to do something as authentic as we know, because it's very, the Japanese culture takes a lot of pride in everything that they do. Whether it's food or crafts or whatever it is, right? And we're gaijins, so that's where that came from. I mean, we full respect. I mean, we we have a huge appreciation for their food and their culture, and but we like sort of the tongue-in-cheek kind of aspect of the name. I mean, it's not. Okonomiyaki is a comfort dish, and we want to represent it and bring it to the United States the best that we can as gaijins, and for the most part, I think people appreciate. I think it's funny, like in my experience, like people that and I'm not going to mention any names, but a Korean girl who grew up in Tokyo grew up being a gaijin, right? They were always a gaijin, and I think for people like that, the name's maybe a little more sensitive than if you're Japanese and you're not a gaijin, right? So I think for the most part, they think it's entertaining, right? It's just there's some people, like I've even had a couple Americans that like taught English over over there in Japan, and they're all like, it's offensive, I was a gaijin in Japan when I taught English there for a year. It's like, no shit, you were a gaijin. Like,
how's that? So much can be offensive without me not even realizing it these days. But I don't understand how that can be offensive.
I think it's funny. If I moved to Mexico, right, I'm going to be an outsider. I mean, you're going to be an outsider,
right?
I mean,
you're going to be a gringo.
If you're an asshole, then you're going to continue to be an outsider. I mean, if you're respectful to them and you integrate yourself appropriately into their culture without acting like you know everything, then maybe you'll move on from being a gringo. Anyway, so
and in this situation with this restaurant, you're being incredibly respectful to the traditions and incredibly respectful to the culture, and you're also marrying in your love of pickling and canning, and having that juxtaposition between that spicy food, maybe the barbecue and so on, and that pickling, as you were talking about there earlier, as you learn. So it's like a mix of both, little of the old, little of the new, with what you're doing. And back to the pickling for a second. It reminds me, pickling and canning. Years ago, we had in New York, we honored Conan O'Brien for you're like, where's this going? But we honored Conan O'Brien for helping his college roommate, Father Paul O'Brien, no relation. He went to the seminary. Conan went to Saturday Night Live or to wherever. Right. But anyway, they started, his Father Paul had started this soup kitchen, if you want to call it, but it was more of like a hunger center for in this town just outside of Boston. And the big thing that they were doing was canning vegetables, and they did, just sort of provide people dignity for, sometimes it was a family coming in that couldn't make ends meet, and they would come into to the food pantry, and they would get all this great food, and it was like a lot of it was locally sourced gardens and so on in the area. And they put the labels. They said labels are for jars. Not, you're not poor. You're not hungry. You shouldn't be ashamed. This is a place that's welcoming for everybody, really, of all walks of life. Because that's what they were saying. It wasn't just homeless people. It was people that just could not make ends meet. So Conan very humbly opened up this center with his college roommate. And through them, we made a donation. We honored them at this event in New York. And it was just something that they've been doing, and they continue to be charitable. And I say this because it was sort of like a hook to what the Oracle of Hinsdale has also told me, that you and your humble nature, he's like, you won't find this in any of your research, but every time a school needs something, whether it's an auction item or they need food, they go to you, and you never say no, and you're helping all these people. So just wanted to say that because I know you wouldn't bring that up yourself, but
that's really nice. Thank you.
It just reminded me with the canning of what they were doing outside of Boston and what you're doing outside of Chicago to help these help the great schools that your kids went to. But I'm an auctioneer, and I host charity auctions all over the country, and I do a lot of work in Chicago. But my favorite thing to sell, and I'm not just pandering here because I'm with you, is a chef experience in someone's home. Ladies and gentlemen, this next item up for bid is coming from to say this chef, and then to add onto it the fact that you actually were on Iron Chef America.
Yes.
So, I mean, there's this one package we sell for a chef who was on like season 1 of Top Chef and got eliminated like the first episode. But we get to say he was on Top Chef, and the paddles fly. People go absolutely crazy for it. And every time I'm consulting with someone about an event, they say, well, what should we have in the auction? What's selling now? And I'm like, regardless of what's going on with people coming to your home or whatever now, or being able to have parties, my favorite thing and the number one thing that resonates with every crowd is food and beverage. And if you've got a chef involved that has any kind of notoriety, you're going to get a lot of money for that package. So, well done to you. And do you do that kind of package where you offer to go to somebody's house and do a meal for like 8 to 10 people?
Yeah, we have. I mean, we've done that. I mean, I've done obviously a lot of those over the years for charity. I mean, I've also done them for pay too, which is nice, right? Yeah.
Like sometimes it's on consignment, and we tell the chef, we're like, hey, we don't expect you to buy the food. We don't expect, what would your time cost in this? And they usually throw a number out there. And then, and then they're like, hey, and if the charity wants to do 5 of them, we'll do 5 of them. And they make a ton of money.
Right. I mean, it was crazy with the pandemic, like stuff was kind of put on hold, but I've done a lot of stuff with Meals on Wheels over the years, and we just did I was short staffed at the restaurant. So my wife and I just did a dinner for 10 people back in maybe like right before Thanksgiving or around Thanksgiving in Hinsdale for a party of 10, which was a lot of fun. So, multi-course meal, like that kind of stuff. But yeah, I enjoy that stuff.
Yeah, it's fun.
It's something different, right?
Yeah.
I enjoy it. Right.
And the experience for the auction winners, they're like, we're not just, they get to enjoy. And you think about this over the last couple of years, how much people have put into their homes, working from home. People have invested back into their homes, and hey, let's have a chef come over and prepare a gourmet meal in our beautiful home, and let's show this place off. Maybe it's my partner's big birthday, or kids turning 21, and we want to have this like gourmet experience to say, finally you're legal, and you can have a real glass of wine, and it will go perfectly with this this meal. Yeah, it's an experience, and that's what it really boils down to is the actual experience. And speaking of experiences, I didn't mean to sort of breeze over glaze over the experience you had on Iron Chef America. How did this come about?
They, just like the Michelin Guide, you get that call. They call you and they say, you'd be interested in being on Iron Chef. It's like, of course I would, right? You're like hanging up the phone. I look at my father-in-law. I'm like, that was a Food Network. They want me to go on Iron Chef. So it was a tremendous opportunity. And it's funny because people, that show aired in 2009. So obviously at this point, I'm like, this is old news, right? Like it's you know, but people still love to hear about it. They love to talk about it. You know, they want to hear, you know, but it was a great experience. I mean, I had a chance to go against Morimoto, which is, you know, he's like he's like the OG, right? He's one of he's from the Japanese show, you know. He was Iron Chef Japan, right?
Yeah.
On the original show.
The OG indeed.
Yeah, and
G, I should point out for him, G does not mean gajin.
No. Well, it does now, because that's the whole thing. If you're Japanese and you move away from the motherland, you're a gaijin.
Oh, you're a gaijin now? Okay.
He's a gaijin.
A non-traditional gaijin.
Right. Yeah. But anyway, I hope it would be huge. It'd be an honor, right, to have him come to gaijin. You know, like I'd love to try to figure out how I could connect with him. And, you know, I mean, obviously I've met him over the years at different events. I mean, you know, he's one of those chefs. You go to these big charity events, you know, he's hard to get to. He's a big deal, right?
Sure.
But it'd be cool to have him. But it was a great experience, and we were really fortunate. I mean, it ended up being pheasant was the ingredient.
And you're like, yes.
Yes. And that's my wheelhouse. So that was great. But you know, we lost by 1 point. But he,
to Morimoto.
Yeah, we lost by 1 point, but I beat him on flavor.
Okay.
But he beat me on presentation. But he also, like, I did 5 dishes. He pulled 6 out, and I don't know how he did that, but he pulled 6 out. But you know, it's what it is. I'll take a 1 point loss to him, and I'll end up, and even more so is the fact that I beat him on taste.
Yeah, you beat him on taste, and you laid it on the line, and you left a pint of blood out there on that field.
Right. No, but he was. I had crossed paths with him years later after that event, and he remembered me, which was I'll take it. I'm like, it's great, you know.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, you know. I mean, he does his English isn't great, but the message was like, you know, you guys
never forget the face. He goes, hey,
yeah, you guys brought a solid game, you know, to Kitchen Stadium, right? But yeah, that was a great opportunity, Pat, doing that. I would do that again, you know, for sure.
All right, well, there you go, Iron Chef. He's ready to do it again.
Yeah.
Hey, look, and I know we're right. The rematch with Morimoto. It's Virant versus Morimoto, round 2, and then round 3 would of course be no mas. And speaking of no mas, we are no mas time. I know we're running out of time here, so just a couple quick questions. Maybe we'll do this in a lightning round. You recently announced, which I saw on your Instagram, that after 16 plus years of tremendous success, is going from a la carte to prefix. Why?
You know, it's been something I've been thinking about for years, and the idea is that, I mean, it's a 3-course menu, 3 savory courses, 3 options in each course, and it's really, I think, for us and my kitchen staff and the restaurant, a great opportunity to really sort of embrace and showcase what we're excited about, what's in season, what we have stashed in the preserved room or whatever it is. But it's just, you know, we're just trying to really create an experience that really represents like the best of what the upper Midwest has to offer. And it's great. And, you know, the pandemic obviously has been a challenge for a lot of restaurants, but I feel pretty grateful.
Understatement.
I feel pretty grateful. We've shifted in a lot of different things. Like I took the opportunity to sort of like, you've been thinking about this, maybe it's time to do it. So that was one of my longtime servers who was managing, always wanted to get into the whole wine thing and really push to become a sommelier. So yeah. Grace is doing that now. So she's curating like incredible wines that pair with the prefix menu. So nice. I think,
Okay.
it's a $60 menu, so it's like, I think there's a ton of value there. I try to encourage people, like, it doesn't have to be, you come in with, it could be 2 people. You could just do one menu. You still have 3 plates that you're having, it could be a 4-top that gets 2 or 3 menus, and then it's a 4-top, you get 3 menus, you have 9 different plates that you're sharing, I personally am a big family style sharing stuff, the old guard of, like, what's everybody getting? And then you have your dish, your salad, then your
plates, pass them around. Oh yeah, so much better.
I know that's not a great thing now with, like, Omicron, like, raging through the country, but
right.
But
hey, we're at least in New York, we're hitting that peak, and we're gonna be on the other side of it. And it seems to be going. It seems to be going west. So you guys will be a month after us. You'll be past it as well.
Yeah, my wife said today that it looks like it's peaking. It's beginning to peak here too.
Yeah.
So
it's good.
So
all right, so you're ahead of time. And she's a doctor, folks. Listen to her. Listen to doctors. Yes. Listen to the scientists.
Listen to the scientists, right?
Listen to the science. Why are people listening to science? Why do they think they know more? Fascinating. Really, really fascinating. They think there's other factors at play.
I had a customer last night at Bistro Prime in DuPage County, right? Not Cook County. Cook County has a mandated vaccination card that you are required to show along with your ID. He was asking me last night, if he goes to V, he's not vaccinated. Can he have, can he go in there? Can you make an exception? And I said, no, sorry, dude. I said, how about get your vaccinations? And he's like, then he's going on about, like, some health issues. I'm like, oh, Jesus,
Yeah, V means life, and V also means vaccinations. So get them. There you go. There's our PSA.
I like that.
There's our
PSA. I'm going to use that.
You go for it. Quote me warmly and accurately, and I'll make sure that I tell the Oracle and Mrs. Oracle to go in and try the new prefix menu as well, because they, as far as I know, are fully vaccinated, so they can do that. But you mentioned Bistro Prime, and you were talking about the hotel concept earlier. And again, just quickly, what is when you do expand? First, going out on your own is an unbelievable challenge. In the restaurant business, to open up a second one, what a challenge. But what really is that biggest risk when you're opening up a second place? I mean, you're essentially spreading yourself a little thin with that second place. But really, what is that biggest challenge of doing it?
Yeah, the big challenge, it ends up being like, I think, having the right people, right? If you don't have the right people, you can't do it. So that's the biggest challenge. The biggest challenge is, do you have a team in place? Do you have the infrastructure in place that you can do that? And you got to have that when you open. But then what ends up happening, and this happens to anybody in any career, people leave, management changes, stuff happens, and how you navigate yourself through that kind of battle. But staff is huge.
Talent is hot, and people poach the talent. And now, restaurants are finding this challenge, harder than ever.
Yeah. And we touched upon that a little bit earlier on when we were talking about Eberhard, the chef at Lutessa, New York. But, like, culture is important, and making sure that, whatever package you're offering, it's got to be attractive, and that's a challenge. And if you got to raise prices, then that's what you got to do, to make sure that you're taking care of your staff,
And I think people understand that. I mean, especially in New York, when the friends from out of town are like, oh, how do you live in New York? It's so expensive. The restaurants, et cetera. It's like, well, we have the best chefs in the world and the best food in the world, or at least, some of the best food in the world. And you know what? Just go out to the restaurant and enjoy your hard work. You've earned it. And enjoy their hard work and pay them for it. They've earned it. Right.
Yep. Agreed. I agree 100%. 100%.
So look, how do we, I don't want to say what's next for you, because it's like, obviously there's something, but please let everybody know, the cookbook came out a while ago, so you're not promoting that, but is there something that we can get excited about that is next in your growing restaurant empire?
Yeah, next for me, I mean, so we're, Bistro Prime, which was a reconcept steakhouse in Hinsdale, which has gone really well. And we opened in March of last year. And we just had a meeting with my crew yesterday. And it's really, it's like, all right, now we can really start getting our systems in place and making sure that we're running the business as well as we can. So that's a big goal there. Obviously, the prefix menu at V, I'm excited about that. But the big thing is a number 2 Gaijin. That's the big thing. That's what that's the focus for this year for me. So we're actually looking at, and we have a space that we're going to begin negotiating with the lease, a space in Milwaukee. So we're looking to expand.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. Your Packer friends will be very happy.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah.
They'll be upset that there isn't any bratwurst on the menu, but they'll get over it.
Well, maybe we do incorporate. That's the thing about okonomiyaki. Okonomi means have it your way, and yaki is grilled. So it's a savory cabbage pancake. Have it. How do you like it? So you want bratwurst in your okonomiyaki? Yeah, sure. Put it in there, right?
So you have the savory pancake, and you slice up a bratwurst on there, and you roll it up.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we've done, okonomiyaki. I mean, we've done it with corned beef. We've done it with carnitas. We've done it with goat, duck confit. I mean, a lot of different things. It's crazy. I mean, the first time I had it, and I don't mean to digress because you were asking about other things, but it's
Go for it. This is festivalPass stories. I want to hear them.
It's so like conducive to so many different things. It's really like a canvas for whatever you want to put on it. So I'm excited about that. I mean, we'd like to really push the expansion of Gaijin over the next 5 years. That's the move.
Love it. Wow. And it is truly, it's a live event every night. I wasn't kidding. It's a live festival happening in all of those kitchens. So how can we find you on the social media outlets out there as well?
At V Restaurant, at Bistro Prime, at Gaijin Chicago.
Well, folks, he is no longer a Gaijin to the festivalPass family. Check him out in all those places now. And I'm starving, so I got to go get myself a pancake with something savory on top and something pickled, etc. And Chef, thanks for taking us behind the kitchen door for all of these great stories of your entrepreneurial life and your culinary experience and journey. And folks, we will see you next time on festivalPass Stories.
This is festivalPass Stories, a podcast series is told by the people who create and make festivals come to life. You will go behind the stage, kitchen, or studio door to hear the stories of passion and inspiration that started some of the world's most beloved festivals. Hear the startup stories and how an idea went from what if to what's next.